Hello and welcome to the next video in our series of Law for Business, and this is the second one about contracts, which is called Contract Law Advanced. So we're going to look at things that can go wrong with contracts. The first one is the contract is not clear about what is supposed to happen. For example, the buyers think that what they bought online will be delivered to their house, but the sellers think they have to deliver it to the post office to be collected. Another thing that can go wrong is one person has given wrong information. For example, the seller's description on Shopee says it can do something, but when it arrives, it can't. How this is sorted out depends on why it was wrong. If it was wrong by mistake, the seller probably has to either send what they promised, even if it was a mistake, or to give the money back to the buyer. That's the way a contract works. If the seller doesn't do the thing they promised, the buyer doesn't have to do what they promised either. If they lied on purpose to persuade the buyers to buy, it's much more serious because it's against the law for sellers to do that. They will have to give the money back, but there could be other bad results for them. They may have to pay a fine, money, or if it's very bad, they might have to go to prison. They will definitely have to stop selling that thing, and they may be stopped from selling anything, especially if this is not the first time. What if you're buying from or selling to another country? The laws may not be the same in both countries, so the contract should say which country's laws will be used if there is a dispute. Another problem can be if something that's promised in the contract becomes impossible to do. Let's say I agreed to rent 2 houses to you, but before you move in, one of the houses burns down. The legal situation is that if the owner can't do what they promised, the deal is off. But most contracts include an agreement that only that part of the deal will be cancelled and other parts can continue. So the agreement to rent the second house would continue. What if the buyer and seller can't agree how to settle the dispute? If nothing else works, the one who feels cheated can use the country's law to make it right. The seller might feel cheated if the buyer never pays, or the buyer might feel cheated if the thing they bought doesn't work. Using the law like this doesn't work very well, especially if the amount of money is small. It's expensive, slow, and the result is often not what they expect. Let's say you sell something for 1,000 baht and the buyer doesn't pay. You'll have to pay a lawyer 5,000 baht to support your case. If you win and the buyer pays the 1,000 baht, you have still lost money. If you lose, you've lost more money. So the seller will probably decide to do nothing. Because of these problems, many contracts say that if there is a dispute, they will use someone they both respect, which is called an arbitrator or a mediator, to decide who is right. Like using the law, both sides will have a chance to say why they think they are right, but they don't need a lawyer, so it's way cheaper. It's also a lot quicker. Now we're going to look at what is called an act of God. Something happens that is not the fault of the buyer or the seller. For example, if lightning destroys the house you have agreed to rent, or the government makes the thing you agreed to do illegal, the contract will be cancelled and no one is blamed. We're going to look at a few other things. If you make an offer, it stays open until its expiry date or the date for it to be done by is passed. If you make an offer and there's no expiry date, the buyer could accept it any time in the future, maybe after you've forgotten about it. So make sure you have an expiry date on any offers you make. The offer and acceptance must be for the same deal. Let's say I offered to build you a house for 1 million baht, and you say, okay, I agree as long as it's finished by the 1st of August 2026. I have to accept this new condition about when it should be finished. If I just start to build the house without agreeing that I will finish by the 1st of August, you, the buyer, can refuse to pay. That is true whether you finish by the 1st of August or not. If you finish by the 15th of July, the buyer can still say, we never had an agreement or a contract, so I'm not paying. And then the buyer is left with a house he needs to sell to get his costs back. There are things called implied or inferred terms of a contract. These usually happen when there is a pattern of repeated action. For example, you buy 200 snacks per week to sell in your shop. The seller delivers them to you every Tuesday. You pay the seller once per month. The delivery person never gets you to sign anything. Because it's been continuing like this for a long time, there is an implied term added to the contract, even though it's not written there, that the seller doesn't need you to sign. And this is the end, my friends. See you again next time.